Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
This week in Global Print, I will take you to Kabul, Doha, Islamabad, Dushanbe, which is the capital of Tajikistan, and back to Delhi. But before that, dear viewer, I would like to make an appeal. Please do subscribe to The Print. You know that we are not behind a paywall. You know that we are a very young website, and then these past 3 years we have endeavored to the best of our ability to bring to you free, fair, independent, non-partisan and objective journalism. But we need your support. We need you to continue to subscribe to us so that we can continue to bring you these stories and these videos. So do subscribe to us and we will never let you down. So back to my column Global Print this week, in which I talk about the stalled peace talks between the Afghanistan government and the Taliban that have been taking place in Doha, or not taking place, shall I say. You know that these peace talks were launched with much fanfare in Doha, which is the capital of Qatar, on the 12th of September. But for the last 3 weeks, the two sides, that's the Afghan government and the Taliban, have not even begun direct talks. That there are several problems, and let me give you the first two problems. It seems that the Taliban want that the underlying basis for the talks and the future Afghan state should be a Hanafi, Sunni Muslim religious jurisprudence. Now, there has been some pushback from the Afghan government side, and they say, well, it's fine. The majority of Afghans do believe in the Hanafi school of Islam, but we also have, that's the Afghanistan also has a large Shia population, and it also has other very small minorities. You have the Sikhs, although a lot of Afghan Sikhs have now relocated from Afghanistan to India, but still you have very small Sikh pockets as well. Even today in Afghanistan, you have the Hazaras. So the Afghan government is arguing that these minorities should also be respected, and that their religious underpinning should also be part of the future Afghan government structure. That's the first difference. The second difference is that the Taliban wants that the US-Taliban agreement that was forged in February should be the overarching understanding or agreement under which any negotiations between the Afghan government and the Taliban takes place. While the Afghan government is on board this, but they also talk about involving a larger Afghan community. They talk about a Loya Jirga, which is sort of intellectual, civil society, other elected representatives. So these are the two big differences. And the third biggest difference is that in these last 3 weeks since the talks were launched, there have been a number of attacks across Afghanistan in which several people have been killed. Just over the last few days in Nangarhar, in Lagman, there have been suicide bombers. The governor of the Lagman province barely escaped with his life, but several other people have been killed. So the Afghan government is saying is that we have to, in full faith, begun these negotiations with the Taliban, which is not a representative body or elected body of the Afghan people, but because they have gradually expanded their influence across Afghanistan, we are willing to talk to the Taliban. They're also Afghans, so the Afghans must talk to each other. But despite that, the Taliban and various other terror groups have not stopped the bombing and the terrorism. So a ceasefire must be the most important aspect of these stalled talks in Afghanistan. Now, to push these talks, the Afghan President Ashraf Ghani is in Doha even as we speak. He is not meeting the Taliban, but he's certainly meeting his own government delegation in order to see how to push forward these talks that have been stalled for the last several weeks. And simultaneously, the chairman of the High National Reconciliation Council, Dr. Abdullah Abdullah, who's an old friend of India, is in Delhi meeting Prime Minister Modi, the National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, and of course the rest of the Indian establishment to explain to India, to talk to India about what's happening in Afghanistan. Dr. Abdullah will talk about the stalled peace negotiations, and one of the important messages that he will deliver to the Indian side is the following, which is that while India and Afghanistan have this very old bond, not just going back into antiquity, but also over the last 19 years since the Taliban were thrown out after the 9/11 attacks, India has helped the civil society in Afghanistan, elected representatives, people at large, in a variety of ways. About $3 billion in aid has been given for projects as small as 1 million, building a school somewhere, building a wall, even digging a well. So forging and deepening the bonds between the peoples of India and Afghanistan. But Dr. Abdullah's message to Prime Minister Modi this time around will be to tell India to keep a much lower profile than it has these past several years in order to get the peace talks back in action. And why do you think he's saying that? Dr. Abdullah was in Islamabad last week, and where he met not just Prime Minister Imran Khan, but also the Pakistani Chief of Army Staff, General Qamar Javed Bajwa, and others. Now, you know, dear viewer, that the Pakistanis have played a very key role in the last several decades, actually, since the invasion of Afghanistan by the Soviet Union in 1979, and I'm going back 40 years. Because Pakistan is cheek by jowl, it's the southern neighbor of Afghanistan, it has played a key role not just for the Americans at the time, which used Pakistan as passage to send troops, to send armaments to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan. And subsequently, during the 90s, when the Taliban rose, the Pakistanis were instrumental in creating this group called the Taliban, and then sending them marching into Afghanistan. So I'm not going to go back into the history, but suffice to say that Osama bin Laden, the Saudi terrorist, if you like, under whose command the 9/11 attacks took place, in which more than 3,000 people were killed in the US, in New York, Washington, and other parts. Osama bin Laden was found in Pakistan, barely a couple of hours away from the capital, Islamabad. The point that I'm trying to make is that Pakistan's establishment, its ISI, its intelligence agency, and its army have always played a very influential role. And even in these last 19 years, since the Taliban were kicked out, after 9/11, when the Americans came in, the Pakistanis have bided their time. The Taliban has bided its time. But as government after government in Afghanistan, as well as the Americans who have backed the government in Kabul, have made mistake upon mistake, the Taliban have returned slowly and expanded their influence across Afghanistan. And guess who's helped them? It's the Pakistanis. And today, if the Taliban are back in talks, talking to the Afghan government, because the Americans are quite fed up, they want to leave, they want to go home, they have lost many hundreds of lives, they spent nearly $1 trillion in this 19-year-long war in Afghanistan. Who is going to be the most influential and key player in Afghanistan today? Pakistan. So Dr. Abdullah's message to Prime Minister Modi is the following, is that while Kabul and Delhi will maintain a very special relationship, it has to be one which is much more lower in profile than it has been in the past. So bide your time, hide your light. In fact, that's a saying by Deng Xiaoping, the former Chinese premier. And Dr. Abdullah will repeat this message to the Prime Minister. We know that when Dr. S. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister, delivered a message in the Doha talks, the message was to both the Taliban and to the Afghan government. So India has made this shift. It is on board these talks between the Afghan government and the Taliban. But the Afghanistan government, Dr. Abdullah, would certainly like India to continue with its aid projects in education, in other parts of civil society, but to keep a low strategic profile, not to make too much noise on the strategic front. Certainly the Prime Minister understands what's going on in Afghanistan. He understands that this is a delicate time in Afghanistan's history. The Americans are pulling back. The terror attacks have increased as a result of the drawdown of the American troops. Large numbers of people are being killed. The Prime Minister, like no one else, understands that. He knows that Indians have suffered this proxy war from the Pakistanis. He knows today that the Pakistanis, which have not just infiltrated, but which have supported not just the Taliban, but the Haqqani network, the Lashkar-e-Toiba and other groups like that, which have also expanded massive influence into Afghanistan, must be held in check. And nobody else can do that except the Pakistani establishment itself. So that's the irony of the situation. And that's what this evolving peace negotiation or so-called peace negotiation between the Taliban and the Afghan government is all about. No wonder it's stalled, because there are so many factors that are still in play. And Dr. Abdullah's visit to Delhi, from here he will go to other countries, he's going to Turkey and Iran, is precisely to explain to the leaders of these neighboring countries that this is going to be a very important and a fragile time in Afghanistan's history, and we want your support. So whether you like something, you don't like something, the Afghans, most of all, are very nervous about what an era or what power sharing with the Taliban is going to bring them. Are women going to be equal citizens? Are girls going to be allowed to go back to school? Are women going to be allowed to work? Because remember, this is how it was during the Taliban regime from 1996 to 2001. Is this going to be action replay in Afghanistan again, as the Taliban shares power or wants to share power and sit on the gaddi of Kabul? So these next few weeks, months are going to be very, very important. And Dr. Abdullah's visit to Delhi is to explain to Prime Minister Modi and the Indian establishment that we need your support, we need your help. Just like we need your help, dear viewer, so please do subscribe to The Print. This is Jyoti Malhotra. You're watching Global Print. Thank you so much for watching.